I remember the day everything changed like it had been etched into my memory forever. I was 29, the kind of age where you think life is steady, predictable, and safe. My family had always seemed close on the outside, the kind of family that neighbors admired: Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, polite smiles, and the occasional laugh over shared memories. But behind those smiles, I had always felt a quiet distance. I wasn't the favorite, the eldest, or the one anyone seemed to notice much. That distance became painfully clear when my father passed away. It wasn't unexpected. He had been ill for a long time, but the reading of his will was. I had assumed, like any child in a family with one parent, that the estate would be divided fairly. Maybe not equally, but at least justly. Instead, I found myself sitting in a grand, cold office, listening as the lawyer read the details aloud. And then it hit me: I had been cut out. Every property, every bank account, every sentimental heirloom had been assigned to my siblings. Even the small things that had belonged to me as a child were listed as going to someone else. I froze. I could feel my heart racing, my chest tightening, and for a moment I thought I might cry. But instead, I sat there, numb, trying to process what I was hearing. My siblings looked smug, some barely concealing their satisfaction. "Well, it's all been decided," my eldest brother said, not even looking at me. My sister smiled faintly, as if this were all the natural order of things, and I realized something terrifying. I was invisible in the eyes of the people who should have loved me most. Later, in the quiet of my small apartment, I tried to understand. Was it because I had never been ambitious enough in their eyes? Was it because I had quietly worked, helped, and supported the family without ever drawing attention to myself? I remembered the countless times I had saved a crisis, fixing accounts when the family business faltered, negotiating quietly with contractors, lending my name and credibility to help them without asking for anything in return. None of it seemed to matter. I had been erased, deliberately and completely. And yet, as I sat in that silence, something stirred inside me. Not anger, not revenge exactly, but a quiet, determined resolve. I would find out why, and more importantly, I would find a way to prove that my value had never been about what they chose to see. The days that followed were awkward. My siblings flaunted the inheritance, making casual remarks about what they would do, where they would go, and which parts of the estate they had already sold or claimed. They didn't realize that while they were busy celebrating, I was quietly investigating. I began looking through old bank statements, legal documents, and conversations I had overheard over the years. Slowly, patterns emerged. The family estate had been in serious trouble financially, more than anyone had admitted. It wasn't just my father's illness that had drained resources. Mismanagement, bad investments, and a few poor decisions had left the estate on the edge of collapse. And then, buried among files and forgotten correspondence, I found it, the clue that would change everything. I remembered a time, years ago, when I had stepped in quietly to prevent disaster. A bank loan that could have destroyed the estate, a contract that could have bankrupted the family business, a personal guarantee I had given without a second thought, all done in secret because I didn't want recognition or thanks. My heart ached as I realized the magnitude of what I had done, and the injustice of being excluded from the inheritance despite saving everything from collapse. I thought about confronting them, about demanding acknowledgement, but I knew that would be futile. The family who had cut me out would never understand humility or quiet heroism, so I decided to wait. I let the silence grow, watched as they boasted, celebrated, and claimed what they believed was rightfully theirs. And in that waiting, I nurtured something more powerful than anger: patience, clarity, and a plan. I began making discreet inquiries with the bank, asking questions about the estate, the transactions, and the accounts. I didn't mention my name, didn't hint at my involvement. I simply sought information, quietly building a record of the truth. Nights were long, filled with careful notes, revisiting old documents, tracing every decision and every action I had taken to prevent disaster. Each discovery reinforced what I already knew. I had saved the estate from ruin, not for glory, not for recognition, but because I loved my family enough to do it without seeking anything in return. And now, ironically, that very secrecy would be my advantage. I realized that one day, the truth would come out, and when it did, it would speak for itself. My siblings could boast, flaunt, and mock all they wanted. Their pride, their arrogance, their laughter, they could not erase the facts. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I made a promise to myself. I would not let myself be diminished, erased, or forgotten. I would wait, observe, and when the right moment came, the truth would reveal itself, not as a confrontation, but as undeniable proof of my worth. The family estate, the inheritance, the fortune they believed belonged entirely to them. They had no idea that the invisible hand they ignored, the quiet support they never acknowledged, was the reason it still existed. And that knowledge, held quietly in my heart, became my secret power. I went about my life with calm determination, working on my own small ventures, keeping my integrity intact, and knowing that patience, above all, would be my ally. I didn't need to shout, argue, or fight. The world, the law, and the bank would eventually tell the story I could not share publicly. And as I sat by the window one evening, watching the sun dip behind the horizon, I realized that humiliation can be heavy and betrayal can hurt deeply. But true strength is measured not by loud words or visible applause, but by quiet perseverance, integrity, and faith in yourself, even when everyone else refuses to see your worth. And in that soft, reflective moment, I whispered to myself, one day they will see who really saved everything. After discovering the truth about the family estate, I knew I had to proceed carefully. I couldn't let my siblings suspect that I was quietly gathering evidence. Every phone call I made, every meeting I arranged with the bank had to seem casual, harmless. I spent hours tracing documents, looking at old loan agreements, signatures, and transactions that no one seemed to notice. Slowly, the picture became clearer. Without my quiet interventions years ago, the estate would have collapsed. Properties would have been sold at a loss, debts would have mounted, and the family could have lost everything. My heart sank a little thinking about how little they appreciated what I had done, how they had assumed I was useless, careless, or just fortunate to exist in their shadow. Yet in that same moment I felt a quiet satisfaction. I knew the truth, and that truth had power. I began contacting the bank discreetly, asking for clarification on certain accounts, loan repayments, and guarantees. I didn't mention my role in the transactions. I simply asked questions, double-checked information, and gathered every record that proved the estate's survival depended on someone who had acted quietly, behind the scenes. Nights were long, filled with meticulous work, cross-referencing files, reviewing old letters from lawyers, revisiting the days when I had personally stepped in to prevent financial disaster. Every small detail confirmed what I already knew. I had been the invisible lifeline of the family estate. And yet, despite the humiliation of being cut out of the inheritance, I didn't feel anger. I felt a steady resolve, a calm determination that the truth would eventually be revealed, not by me, not by confrontation, but through undeniable evidence. Meanwhile, my siblings continued to flaunt their supposed victory. They discussed plans for renovations, new investments, even trips abroad using the estate funds, never suspecting that the foundations of their wealth rested on my secret work. Their arrogance and lack of awareness only strengthened my resolve. I kept my interactions polite, neutral, even helpful when necessary, maintaining the image of the obedient, somewhat invisible family member. But inside, I was preparing for a quiet reckoning. And then, one day, an opportunity presented itself. I received a phone call from the bank, someone I had been in contact with for weeks under a formal inquiry. Their tone was professional but curious. "We've reviewed the estate accounts," they said. "There seems to be something unusual. Someone covered critical payments and legal obligations that were never officially documented as coming from the estate. Can you clarify?" My heart raced, but I remained calm. I explained carefully how I had personally ensured that the bank obligations were met during critical times, using my own resources and personal guarantees, all to protect the estate. They listened, asked questions, and requested documentation, which I provided. Slowly, the bank began to recognize that the family estate had survived not solely because of the apparent owners, but because of my intervention. Weeks passed. I continued my own work quietly, managing my life, my career, and my responsibilities, while the bank carried out their formal verification. And then, the moment arrived. I received a letter in my name, formal, official, and undeniable. The bank recognized that my actions had saved the estate from financial ruin. They confirmed that my contribution had been critical, that without my intervention, large portions of the estate would have been lost. I read the letter over and over, feeling an emotional weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't about money, although my rightful recognition included proper acknowledgment in the estate records. It was about truth, justice, and finally being seen for the value I had contributed. When I shared the news with my siblings, their faces went pale. The same people who had cut me out of the inheritance, who had mocked me quietly and assumed my efforts were meaningless, were suddenly confronted with evidence they could not ignore. My eldest brother stammered, I didn't realize. My sister's usual smirk was gone, replaced by confusion and embarrassment. And my parents, who had always seemed torn between pride and favoritism, could only look at me silently, as if seeing me for the first time. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock. I simply let the truth speak for itself, calm and undeniable. The bank had validated my quiet heroism, the unseen work I had done to protect the family, and that validation was far more powerful than any argument I could have made. Over the following weeks, family dynamics began to shift. Respect replaced mockery, hesitation replaced arrogance, and for the first time, they acknowledged that I had played a crucial role in preserving the estate. It wasn't an easy adjustment. Years of dismissal and humiliation don't vanish overnight. But the seed of recognition had been planted, and it was undeniable. And through it all, I realized something profound. True strength isn't about proving others wrong or seeking revenge. True strength is quiet, patient, and principled. It's about doing the right thing even when no one notices, and letting the truth eventually find its way to the surface. That quiet, steadfast integrity became my secret power. I could have reacted with anger, confrontation, or bitterness. But I chose calm observation, careful documentation, and patience. And the outcome was far more satisfying than any dramatic retaliation could have been. I had been humiliated, dismissed, and erased in the eyes of my family, but now the undeniable truth had emerged. I had saved the estate, preserved the family legacy, and claimed recognition, not with noise or confrontation, but with integrity, diligence, and quiet resilience. That night, as I sat alone by the window, looking at the softly lit streets, I understood that humiliation can be heavy, betrayal can sting deeply, and being overlooked can feel crushing. But the most powerful response is not anger or revenge, it is quiet perseverance, moral strength, and faith in the truth. And as I held the bank's letter in my hands, I whispered to myself, they cut me out, they doubted me, they laughed at me, but the truth always comes to light, and it cannot be denied. After the bank confirmed my role in saving the family estate, everything changed, but not immediately, not in the way my siblings might have expected. At first, there was silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm, heavy with realization, confusion, and a hint of shame. My eldest brother avoided eye contact, packing the living room during family gatherings, muttering excuses about how he didn't know the full story or was too busy with work. My sister, who had once mocked me openly, now spoke in hesitant, quiet tones, as if testing the waters, trying to figure out how to behave in the presence of someone they had underestimated for so long. Even my parents seemed unsure how to respond. Their pride, their habitual favoritism, and the years of old habits made them cautious, almost awkward. But through it all, I remained calm, patient, and silent, letting the bank's findings speak louder than any argument or explanation I could offer. Slowly, I noticed subtle changes. Invitations to family events included me in ways they had neglected before. Casual remarks acknowledged my efforts, and there were small gestures of respect. My sister asking for advice on managing part of the estate, my brother deferring to me when difficult decisions arose. And while these gestures were welcome, they also reminded me of the years I had been overlooked, of the subtle humiliation I had endured, of the countless moments I had been dismissed. It was bittersweet. I didn't feel anger, not really, but a quiet, reflective sadness. Yet beneath it all, a sense of vindication had begun to settle, warm and steady. The recognition from the bank, the official acknowledgement of my contribution, had shifted the dynamic permanently. I saw it most clearly one afternoon when my father called me into his study. He closed the door, sat down heavily, and said, I was wrong. All these years I never understood. We didn't understand how much you did for the family, how much you sacrificed quietly without ever asking for credit. I listened carefully, feeling a lump in my throat. There were no grand apologies, no dramatic confessions, just sincere acknowledgement, calm and heartfelt. And in that moment, I realized that this was the quiet power of truth. It doesn't need confrontation. It doesn't need shouting. It simply prevails. Weeks later, I received an unexpected call from the bank itself. They had prepared a formal statement acknowledging my role in preserving the estate, including documentation to ensure my share of recognition would be secured legally. My heart swelled quietly. It wasn't just about the estate or the money, it was about the validation of my integrity, my effort, and my unseen contributions. The family could no longer ignore me, could no longer dismiss my worth. And then came the subtle, almost poetic twist. A distant relative, someone who had always envied my family's wealth but had no idea of my quiet involvement, heard about the bank's recognition, and personally contacted me. He proposed an opportunity to invest in a small business venture he was starting, a venture that, with my guidance, could grow far beyond what he imagined. Suddenly, doors that had always seemed closed were opening, not because I demanded it, but because the quiet strength I had shown made people notice me, trust me, and respect me. My siblings watched, still adjusting, as I began to carve out not only rightful acknowledgment but new opportunities. Their astonishment was subtle, a flicker in the eyes, a hesitation in conversation, a rare quiet acknowledgment of what they had ignored for years. I didn't relish their discomfort. I didn't savor it. I simply continued calmly, steadily, and with quiet confidence, letting the results speak. And yet it was strangely satisfying to see the tables turn, not in a loud confrontation, but in the understated, undeniable proof that I had been the one who had saved everything, the one who had preserved the family legacy, and the one who had acted with integrity while being dismissed. One evening, as I sat in my study reviewing documents for the new venture, my sister walked in. She hesitated, then said softly, "I want to apologize, I never saw it before. I didn't know how much you did, how quietly you worked, how much you cared." I smiled gently, not needing to dwell on the past, simply acknowledging her words. "It's okay," I said. "The important thing is that it's clear now." And in that quiet exchange, I felt the weight of years of humiliation and doubt begin to lift. The truth had not only been recognized externally by the bank, but it had also begun to reach my family in a way that words alone could never have accomplished. Over the following months, I continued to build my own path, calmly, steadily, while the family watched, now aware that the person they had underestimated for so long was capable of far more than they had imagined. And through it all, I learned a lesson more valuable than money, recognition, or vindication. Humility, patience, and quiet perseverance hold a power that arrogance and mockery can never match. The bank had revealed the truth, but the real triumph was in the calm, measured way I had waited, prepared, and let the facts speak for themselves. And as I sat by the window one night, looking at the city lights flickering softly, I realized that sometimes, the sweetest victories aren't loud or dramatic. They are quiet, undeniable, and permanent. My family could no longer ignore me, could no longer diminish me, and could no longer pretend that my contributions were insignificant. And the most satisfying part of all was that this recognition had not come from confrontation, from anger, or from revenge. It had come from truth, integrity, and persistence, quiet virtues that, when practiced consistently, eventually demand acknowledgement. That night I whispered to myself, I did not need to fight or shout. I simply needed to do what was right and wait. The truth always finds its way. And for the first time, I felt the deep, calm joy of vindication, not in bitterness or mockery, but in knowing that I had acted rightly, quietly, and with unwavering integrity, and that the world, and eventually my family, could no longer deny my value. The final chapter of this journey unfolded with a quiet, almost gentle inevitability. By now, the bank's formal acknowledgement of my role in saving the family estate had circulated through official channels, and my siblings could no longer ignore what had been done. Their laughter, their mockery, and their casual dismissal had vanished, replaced by hesitant respect, curiosity, and a mixture of shame and awe. I didn't seek confrontation, didn't demand apologies or recognition. Instead, I carried myself with calm assurance, letting the facts, documents, and official validation speak for me. Family gatherings were different now, smiles were warmer, conversations more sincere, and for the first time in years I felt seen. My parents, who had always wavered between favoritism and cautious approval, approached me with quiet humility. My father, once so sure of his judgments, said softly, We didn't understand. I didn't realize how much you did for us, for everything." My mother's eyes glistened with tears as she simply held my hand, her words unnecessary because her silence said it all. Even my sister, who had once mocked my efforts, hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm proud of you." But the true twist, the final, almost poetic turn, came in the days that followed. The bank, impressed by my meticulous records and the undeniable proof of my intervention, arranged a meeting to formally recognize my contributions, including proper documentation in the estate's official records. Suddenly, the narrative had shifted completely. The person who had been cut out, mocked, and dismissed was now publicly recognized as the one who had preserved the entire family legacy. It was a quiet, powerful vindication, far more satisfying than any dramatic argument or confrontation could have been. And then came the opportunity I had never expected. Distant relatives, business associates, and even industry professionals who had followed the estate saga reached out to me. They sought advice, partnership, and collaboration, not because I demanded it, but because the truth of my dedication and capability had become undeniable. I realized then that recognition and respect often arrive quietly, through consistency, integrity, and patience, and not through shouting or retaliation. My siblings watched this transformation unfold, their astonishment subtle but unmistakable. They could no longer assume I was powerless, insignificant, or invisible. And though I did not gloat, there was a serene satisfaction in knowing that years of silent perseverance, quiet problem solving, and steadfast dedication had finally been seen, validated, and honored. One afternoon, my father approached me again, a quiet smile on his face. "You saved everything," he said. "And you did it without ever asking for credit. I've never been more proud." I nodded, feeling a deep warmth in my chest, the kind that comes from finally being recognized, not through confrontation, but through undeniable truth. Weeks later, the estate lawyers formally updated all records, ensuring my rightful acknowledgement and share were officially documented. It was the quietest, most complete form of justice I could imagine. And yet, the most profound lesson wasn't in the money, the estate, or the public recognition. It was in the transformation of relationships, the understanding that my quiet strength had reshaped the way my family saw me, the way the world saw me, and most importantly, the way I saw myself. I had endured humiliation, exclusion, and disbelief, but through patience, integrity, and careful perseverance, I had achieved what words alone could never guarantee: undeniable respect, both from others and from myself. And in the soft evenings that followed, sitting by my window and reflecting on the journey, I realized that true power lies not in revenge, not in dramatic confrontations, and not in forcing recognition, but in the quiet, steadfast commitment to doing what is right, even when it goes unseen. The truth, I understood, always finds its way. Those who once doubted me, laughed at me, or dismissed my efforts now recognized the quiet heroism that had preserved everything they valued. And for me, that recognition was sweeter, not because it humbled them, but because it affirmed that patience, integrity, and quiet resilience are forces stronger than mockery or neglect. My story became a reflection on life itself. The moments of humiliation we endure, the times we are overlooked or dismissed, and the patience we practice in silence all build the foundation for a quiet, lasting triumph. And as I sat that night, the soft glow of the city lights outside my window, I whispered to myself, I didn't need to fight, to shout, or to demand. I simply did what was right, waited, and let the truth emerge. That is power. That is strength. That is peace. And in that peaceful understanding, I felt complete, not because I had claimed what was mine, but because I had done it with integrity, calm determination, and the knowledge that being true to oneself is the most profound victory of all.